Today, the Virginia State Supreme Court struck down the congressional redistricting approved by Virginia voters 17 days ago. It is a big blow to democracy as voters there opted for this new map. But it's also a blow to the Democratic Party ahead of the 2026 midterms as they seek to counter the GOP efforts to gerrymander themselves in a victory at the behest of Donald Trump. In a statement, Virginia's Attorney General Jay Jones said this, quote, "Today, the Supreme Court of Virginia has chosen to put politics over the rule of law. This decision silences the voices of the millions of Virginians who cast their ballots in every corner of the Commonwealth. And it fuels the growing fears across our nation about the state of our democracy. My team is carefully reviewing this unprecedented order, and we are evaluating every legal pathway forward to defend the will of the people and protect the integrity of Virginia's elections." As California Governor Gavin Newsom put it on social media, quote, "No vote in Tennessee, plus 1 GOP seat. No vote in Florida, plus 4 GOP seats. No vote in Missouri, plus 1 GOP seat. No vote in North Carolina, plus 2 GOP seats. No vote in Texas, plus 5 GOP seats. Virginia's voter-approved maps thrown out. MAGA has rigged the system." And at the same time, as Virginia's democratically passed maps have been blocked, Republican state legislatures are moving full steam ahead in passing maps specifically designed to eliminate majority black congressional districts without consulting their voters at all. That happens after the U.S. Supreme Court gutted the Voting Rights Act earlier this week. Today in South Carolina, senators debated a proposal that would allow a special redistricting session to go forward that would eliminate the state's only black district held by longtime Congressman Jim Clyburn. While in Alabama today, a protester was removed from the gallery at the legislature by state troopers there as lawmakers debated a bill to facilitate redistricting in that state. It was signed into law earlier today. In Tennessee, lawmakers have already approved new maps which abolish the state's only majority black district. While Tennessee State Representative Justin Pearson called it, quote, "a political lynching that violated the rights of every Tennessean." Here he is on the floor of the State House.
This state has legislated and legalized the worst things in humanity, including our enslavement, and we are still here. Right in this country where, as one black woman said, your ancestors enslaved us, denied us of our rights, called us 3/5 of a person, and yet we are still here. You put us on cotton plantations and tobacco plantations. You denied our human rights and our right to exist as children of God, and we are still here. You destroyed Tulsa. You killed and lynched black folks on poplar trees. Shelby County, Tennessee had the most lynchings of anywhere in this state where you're taking this district, and we are still here. You've had 3 strikes laws, mass incarceration, denied us of who we are, and we are still here. And today you'll take the only majority black district from us. But I want you to know, and I want my nephew, sons, and the future to know, no matter what you do, no matter how much you try and break us and make us bend and make us quit, we will still be here.
We will still be here. That message, that delivery of that message, that articulation of resilience and resistance on a day in which democracy took a very serious hit is where we start the hour with Democratic Congressman Maxwell Frost of Florida. And joining me at the table, host of Politics Nation, president of the National Action Network, the Reverend Al Sharpton. Rev, let me start with you.
I think that we are seeing the end of the second Reconstruction. The rawness and insensitivity that is being done shows that these people are deliberately saying that as we call on the world to celebrate the 250th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence, the very principles that we claim the country has started, because everybody in the country was not same status. Blacks were slaves 250 years ago. Women couldn't vote. But we're not even going to pretend during this anniversary that this is about democracy. We are going to, as it was put up by Governor Newsom, we're going to, with no votes, change what we want. And if the people in Virginia vote, we'll just flip it over in the Supreme Court. So we are approaching this 250th anniversary at more like King George than we are like those that signed the Declaration of Independence, because they're saying that might is right. We're going to rule no matter what. And we're going to use race as one of the ways that we're going to whip everybody in line. I might remind people the black majority district in Tennessee is represented by white. Blacks vote for whites. Blacks vote for blacks. So it's not like just black representation. The congressman in Tennessee, the black district, is white. In fact, I'm having him on the show this weekend, and Justin, who's running against him. So, I mean, the whole idea of us bringing the country together, they're ripping the shreds, and they're doing it gleefully, and they're doing it openly. The question is, will we be able to come with the same force that our forefathers did?
What does that even look like right now?
I think you've got to organize and mobilize. There are groups. I've been on the phone all day with National Action Network and NAACP head and others. We need to be doing everything from the streets to doing local decentralized organizing. If you get, you must remember, Nicole, Martin Luther King, Fannie Lou Hamer, all of them that brought us to Voting Rights Act, they didn't have the techniques that we have. They didn't have social media. Martin Luther King never knew what a cell phone was. Never had email.
Is that better, though, that people were together and they were in the streets?
It was better if we're not using more ways to communicate. Mm-hmm. I think our challenge is that if they didn't have the options we have to organize, then that means that we are falling down on the job, not that the job is insurmountable. They were getting lynched. Goodman, Cheney, Swerner, Viola Louisa, all of them were killed for trying to get the right to vote. We're talking about we may miss a day or two of relaxation at home. There is no excuse, blacks, whites, and everybody else, not to be on the front lines trying to save democracy. Not just for blacks. They're going to do it all across the board. They're only going to start with us.
Congressman, you're one of your party's best communicators, and I wonder what your thoughts are today and what your message is to the country.
My heart is heavy for the country because we see that this is going on all across the South. And it's important for people to realize that this isn't happening in a vacuum. This isn't a plan that just came up because Donald Trump said to go redistrict. This is the product of a 60-plus year plan to bring this country into Jim Crow 2.0, an era where they've traded in the hoods for suits and ties, an era where they are trying to use our democracy against us to take away not just our right to vote, but our right to protest, our right to privacy, our right to health care, our right to be able to actually have life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness in this country. And they see the South as a threat. And that is the reason why some of the worst voter suppression tactics we see are in the South. Over 40% of this nation's black residents live here. Most of this nation's civil rights and mass movement, people-centered movements started in the South. So we see that they put us right in the middle of the bullseye because they know that we will rise up and we will fight back.
I want to associate myself with the dog barking along with us.
I'm sorry about that.
Don't be sorry. Don't ever apologize for the canines in your lives. I want to ask you, this has been, we were talking before we came on the air, this has been a bleak week of news in terms of the anti-democratic forces sort of logging some legal victories and now taking those and ramming through gerrymandered maps. What is your message in terms of sort of dusting ourselves off and continuing the fight for democracy?
Well, the first thing I'll say is what our opposition wants us to do is throw our hands in the air and say there's nothing more left. There's nothing we can do. We shouldn't take part in this system. If we walk away from the fight, our adversaries and our opposition, they are more than happy to step into our political power for us. So we can't run away. That is what they want. We have to continue to fight. And now we understand that we have to do it in very creative ways. And I love what the Reverend had brought up. It's all about grassroots organizing and making sure that we're going out into the communities and empowering people. And we have to understand, and I think this is important because what I'm about to say might be misconstrued. We have to understand that we asked people to go to the ballot box to protect democracy, and the Supreme Court said we're throwing it out. We have to understand that as a result of that, a lot of people are going to feel like it doesn't matter anymore. Us as organizers, us as leaders, understanding that isn't so that way we give up, but so we understand in the way that we message that we have to validate the root of our people's concern. Yes, this is a broken system. Yes, I understand that you might not feel great about our democracy right now because they're trying to break it. It will bend, but we will be the ones to ensure that it doesn't break. And I think that acknowledgement going forward is important. We can't gaslight people who have seen what have been going on, especially in the South over the last 100 years. But we have to say that we are not unique in this moment. Like the Reverend brought up, our ancestors have been here before, those before us, with less at their disposal. And they did a lot with less, and we can do the same thing. And what I do believe there's going to be a moment where we're looking back on this era, and that we're thankful that we kept marching and that we kept moving forward. But it's going to take all of us, and it's going to take elected officials. And I have to say this, elected officials need to stop just trying to knock doors and organize 3 months before Election Day. Year round. Don't be raising money and keeping it in an account for some race that might come. Spend it year round on the doors, community events, building power so we win not just the next election, but the next 10. That's what the right wing has done in the South. They don't make short-term plans. They make long-term plans. And I think it's important that we do the same. And if we do that, I believe we can win.
Talk to us about your lawsuit. What is it you're trying to drive to? Because I think a lot of people think this is kind of like, oh, done.
Well, it has been a perilous week in American democracy, right, as we witness the fallout of the Supreme Court's decision. Lawmakers across the South are moving at lightning speed and intentionally targeting Black voters, dismantling majority Black districts, seeking to silence Black voters, seeking to strip power away from Black elected officials. I'm somebody who has been a lifelong civil rights lawyer, and I have fought many of voting rights battles, but this moment is like none other. What we saw yesterday in Tennessee is something that I think we'll talk about for generations. But for now, the NAACP is doubling down on the fight that lies ahead. We will use every tool available to beat back the discrimination that we are witnessing in this moment. And we filed suit in Tennessee State Court challenging the proclamation issued by the governor that called this special session. The law requires that those proclamations be very exact and precise in terms of the purpose for bringing the legislature back. He said the purpose was to redraw maps, but he didn't just do that. He repealed a law that has been on the books for 5 decades that actually prohibits Tennessee from engaging in mid-decade redistricting. He also wiped away a residency requirement for lawmakers as they move forward with these new maps, and wiped away a requirement that local election officials actually tell voters what precinct they're assigned to. So we're arguing that the proclamation was illegitimate and that this session should be wiped off the books, and that the existing maps should be used for elections this year.
Representative Pearson, you are a plaintiff in this lawsuit that was filed Thursday in the district court for the Middle District of Tennessee. This is an assault on Black people in this country. And frankly, it's been happening for a while now. When I first met you, it was because you and 2 other state elected officials were kicked out of the chamber during a session because, well, we don't even need to go through it. They kicked y'all out and not anybody else. And so you had some very impassioned words on the floor from the State House yesterday. I know you were they attempted to bar you from reentering. What is your message to not just other elected officials in state legislatures across the country, but Black and brown voters in some of these states across the South, across the country, about what it's going to take? Because we are, I believe, in a post-Reconstruction period, another one right now. Oh, I think you're muted. There you go.
Thank you. What we experienced and what we saw yesterday in the state of Tennessee was a political lynching. It is very much an era of retribution that we are entering into in the United States of America across the South, where 12 to 20 United States House seats that are Black majority are at risk of being taken away, and nearly 200 seats for state House members and state Senate members are likely to be taken away by the rise of white supremacy and its attempt to solidify its power on behalf of the biggest white supremacist in the United States of America, which is the President of the United States. I was expelled, and my other Black colleague was expelled from the Tennessee General Assembly, standing up against gun violence, while our white colleague was not. That's not accidental or coincidental. This is a part of who the Tennessee General Assembly is. But in this particular moment, we all have to stand up, speak up, and fight back from whatever positions we have in every part of this country. At the State House, in the governor's mansions, we need to be advocating and fighting and resisting, because what just happened in Tennessee was the largest and the most swift disenfranchisement of Black people that we have seen in at least a century.
Kristen Clarke, your sense of where this fight goes next?
So a few things. I think that we're going to see a lot of battles in the courts as civil rights lawyers and organizations like the NAACP fight back. I think that we're going to see a groundswell of support inside of our Capitol houses as lawmakers put targets on majority Black districts. People are going to show up and use their voices to speak out, as we saw yesterday in Tennessee, as we saw today in Louisiana and Alabama. But most importantly, I think we're going to see people on the streets in every corner of this country resisting this return to Jim Crow 2.0. So we are in a battle to save democracy. Justice Roberts was wrong when he put the first death knell in the Voting Rights Act and claimed that it was a new day and that voting discrimination was a thing of the past. We have seen racism unleashed in our political process, and in this moment, every American needs to use their voice to speak out.
I just kind of look at all of this, Representative, and I alluded to it coming in about where the trend line of the country is going. And what a lot of this, for me, signals is fear, that thus the replacement theory BS that you hear a lot of folks out there, sort of sound like little crows out there mimicking. You also recognize how much the country foundationally could change. When you look at your own legislature, when you look at the men and women in that chamber and you look at how they're treating you, their fear is one day, sir, you're going to be sitting there as the speaker of that chamber. You're going to be sitting there as the majority leader in that Senate. You may be standing there as the governor of that state one day with the power to do to them what they're doing to us, to you right now. How do you see that future? And what are you saying to particularly constituents your age who are for the first time having to confront something that I went through with my parents back in the 1960s. And now here you are as a young legislator, already having experience, as Simone pointed out at the beginning, what Jim Crow feels like and sounds like and looks like. How do you help young people appreciate what this moment requires of them going forward?
I think the main thing that people have to realize, and what young people realize in particular, is that we did not get this far by ourselves. The work of our ancestors, the blood, the sweat, and the tears that they shed for 400 years in this country is how we've gotten to the point and the places that we are. I'm running for the United States Congress after the same women who watched me give Easter speeches now want to see me give speeches in the United States Congress. That is the arc that we understand as a people, that we have persevered through everything that has been thrown at us, from enslavement to lynching, from the burning of Tulsa to the Memphis Massacre, from mass incarceration to now the removal en masse of Black political power through congressional seats. We have persevered, and that perseverance does scare them. It worries a lot of people. It worries, the biggest worry of white supremacy, because they've tried everything to destroy us. They've tried everything to break us, and it does not work. We continue to persist. We continue to fight back. We can continue to build power. And in this moment in time, that is what we are seeing, a mass mobilization of people, unlike anything that we've seen recently, at least in Tennessee history, but likely across the South, to organize organize, to mobilize, to activate, to register more voters, but then to make sure they get to the polls. They've broken up all these districts thinking that we're not going to be able to compete in them, but we are, and we're going to win. And so what the devil means for bad, God's going to turn into good. But I do know that the history of our ancestors is our encouragement for why we have to fight and why we will win.
Hey, good morning. It is Saturday, May the 9th. I'm Ali Velshi, and there's a story unfolding right now in the American South that might not be at the top of your news feed, but I happen to think it's the most urgent problem facing every one of us today, no matter where in the country we live. It's a story you might even think you know because it started, like so many second-term Trump emergencies, looking like a shameless power grab by a wannabe dictator facing the electoral consequences of his deeply unpopular regime. But two major developments in recent days have turned this cynical Trumpian scheme into a real-time deconstruction of our multiracial democracy. What we're witnessing as a result is the dawn of a new Jim Crow era, one that uses the same pernicious strategy of leveraging bad faith pretense and dirty tricks to rob American citizens of their voting rights or of the weight and value of their vote. The first part, the laying of the groundwork, you probably remember. Donald Trump was afraid of his party losing the midterms because his policies are so fantastically unpopular, so he set forth a plan quite openly of targeted gerrymandering to rig congressional district maps so that Republicans would pick up extra seats without picking up any extra votes. It began in Texas with a phone call from Donald Trump to Governor Abbott. Last August, Trump states his desires very plainly.
We have an opportunity in Texas to pick up 5 seats. We have a really good governor, and we have good people in Texas. And I won Texas. I got the highest vote in the history of Texas, as you probably know. And we are entitled to 5 more seats.
Entitled? It spread state to state, anywhere with a Republican state house. One of the only GOP-led states to buck the request from Trump was Indiana, where a handful of state senators, Republican state senators, voted down the effort to change their state map. Trump was quick to target them for retribution. In fact, this past Tuesday, in the Republican primaries in Indiana, 6 of 8 Republican state senators who opposed Donald Trump's redistricting effort were voted out by the MAGA base. They were replaced by Trump-endorsed candidates. Now, across the country, some Democrats fought back. In California and Virginia, both states which believe that redistricting should be nonpartisan, Democrats organized referendums to allow voters, the ones who actually matter, the choice to adopt new maps as a sort of a counterbalance. So for a while, it was a fight. But then 2 rulings from 2 different courts changed everything. First, the U.S. Supreme Court effectively tore down the last real remaining pillar of the Voting Rights Act last week, erasing protections that were designed to preserve the voting power of black communities. That cleared the way for southern states to redraw districts in ways that will unquestionably dilute black voting rights, eliminate black majority districts, and roll back black representation in Congress. And they rushed to do exactly that. Louisiana, Tennessee, Mississippi, Alabama, and South Carolina all began the process for implementing new maps. On Thursday, Tennessee's governor signed into law a congressional map. It's hard to see that these 2 maps look the same. Look at the one on the left, look at the bottom left corner, the little blue thing, and look at the one on the right. This new congressional map eliminates the only majority black district in the entire state, which is the Democratic-held district surrounding Memphis. You can see how they did it on this map. They took the 9th congressional district, which included Memphis and its surrounding area, and split it into 3 different districts. In gerrymandering speak, that's what's known as cracking. You take a concentrated population of voters and you crack the block into separate districts, diluting the voting power of that group. Every eligible voter in Memphis will get to vote this November, but their vote will mean less by design. Yesterday, a legislative committee met in Louisiana to discuss a new map which would eliminate one of 2 majority black districts in that state. Louisiana is 1/3 black, and under the new map that erases a black majority district, the state will have 1/6 black majority congressional districts. Mind you, 40,000 people have already voted in the state's primary, which has now been suspended. Alabama Republicans are attempting to fast-track a new map targeting 2 predominantly black congressional districts. Over a quarter of Alabama's population is black. They may not have a single representative in Congress after this. They'll still get to cast a ballot this November, but their votes will mean less by design. Mississippi Republicans will convene for a special session on May the 20th to discuss new state Supreme Court maps. It took Florida Republicans no time to pass a new map which targeted 4 Democratic seats. South Carolina Republicans are trying to eliminate the state's lone Democratic seat held by Congressman Jim Clyburn. But the Republican State Senate, their leader there isn't fully convinced just yet. But if they do push forward, they will have to delay their state's primary. And then yesterday, the other shoe dropped. The Virginia Supreme Court ruled that the state's new map, the one that would have benefited Democrats, the one voted in by the citizens of Virginia a couple of weeks ago, is unconstitutional. The ruling was essentially procedural. The referendum to redistrict was a constitutional amendment, and Virginia has a strict process for enacting constitutional amendments. In a 4-3 split decision, judges found a flaw in how the referendum was brought to Virginia voters, and they threw it out, without regard for the fact that they voted. Virginia voters voted 2 weeks ago to approve the amendment, which is to say that the state Supreme Court in Virginia has invalidated 1.6 million votes. It's invalidated the clear preference for Democratic governance in Virginia that Virginia voters have voted for loud and clear since last November. You may be wondering how in a functioning democracy we can land in such a place, where Louisiana's governor can suspend an election to push through a new map. And in Tennessee, it takes 4 business days to disenfranchise 1 million black voters. Florida and Mississippi and Alabama pushing through new maps, but Virginia can hold a whole election to decide on a new map by popular vote, and the will of the people gets tossed out by the courts. This is a flashing red warning light that we are slipping out of being a functional democracy right now in real time. A patchwork legal system for drawing congressional maps means some states, like California, have nonpartisan redistricting commissions. Virginia is also bipartisan. And other states leave it up to their legislature. In Alabama, Mississippi, Tennessee, Republicans hold veto-proof majorities in the state legislature, which doesn't matter because the governor's a Republican anyway. They wouldn't veto it. But this means fewer legal hurdles to jump. In Florida's case, they just ignored their state constitution entirely. Back in 2010, Florida voters passed an anti-gerrymandering amendment. Florida's new map is being challenged on that basis, but the Florida Supreme Court is packed with Ron DeSantis allies, so again, it's not going to matter. Let's be clear, this system diminishes the power of everyone's vote. You may not live in Louisiana or Tennessee or Alabama or Mississippi, but if we are living in a system where everyone's vote doesn't carry the same weight, it means your vote is diluted too. Doesn't matter how hard you vote Democrat in California or New York if the system is rigged in half a dozen southern states. That is where democracy is defeated. In the abstractions, in the corrupting little power grabs and screams. Democracy is not defeated because somebody stands up and says, democracy ends on Tuesday. It's defeated in the dozens or hundreds of smaller, malevolent moves against it. And right now, this is the most important one. And look, Democrats were always the underdogs in this fight. Their approach to mid-decade redistricting was retaliatory. Democratic-led redistricting has been framed as a necessary offset to Trump's push in Republican-led states. The disenfranchisement of black voters we're seeing now is the culmination of a larger political project to marginalize minorities, and it's going to take more than a few extra seats in California to fight it back. What this country needs to start thinking about is a new Reconstruction. Nonpartisan, nationwide redistricting, campaign finance restrictions, easier elections, or at least elections that are easier to vote in, and a fair and just Supreme Court. The response to measured autocracy cannot be improvised. It cannot be improvised retaliation. Let me tell you about the states that have already enacted new maps and the party which stands to benefit from each. In Texas, Republicans could gain 5 seats, 1 seat in North Carolina, 1 or 2 in Ohio, 3 or 4 in Florida, 1 in Tennessee. Democrats, on the other hand, could gain 5 seats in California, 1 in Utah. Louisiana could add yet 1 more in the Republican column. But even these gains, I just want to be fair, are presumptive. Voters haven't voted yet. Nothing is certain. What's left of American democracy is, in fact, up to you. up to voters defying the expectations of people who seek predetermined outcomes to elections, who seek to choose their voters rather than to let their voters choose them.
Good evening from New York. I'm Chris Hayes. You know, the most dramatic thing that a judge or judges can do in a democracy is to just throw out the results of an election. That's as serious as it gets, right? It's essentially unheard of outside of really rare cases of fraud, right? Otherwise, you don't get to just throw out an election. I mean, the idea of one person or a small handful of people setting aside the will of the citizens, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, even millions of citizens, that's pretty alien to our democratic traditions. It just doesn't happen that much. That is what happened in the Commonwealth of Virginia today. Shockingly, appallingly, really. The Supreme Court of that state ruled 4-3 to strike down the congressional redistricting plan that, crucially, had been approved by the state voters in a special election last month, as we covered here at this desk, with millions of people campaigning or showing up at the polls. It won 52 to 48%. Again, weeks of campaigning, millions of dollars spent on ads by both sides, a vigorous public debate, and the people came out, 3 million, to the polls in that Virginia referendum, and a majority of the people said, yes, we want these new maps. And today, a panel of judges, by the narrowest of margins, 4-3, tossed that result out because they say of a technical issue with how that referendum got on the ballot, their interpretation of one word in the state statute. They didn't just block the new congressional map, they vetoed the election. And in so doing, they have also sent the American political system in toto barreling back towards Jim Crow disenfranchisement. As we've been covering closely on the show, as you know have been following, they have handed Republicans now a huge victory in the race to the bottom gerrymandering arms race that Trump started to stay in power. Donald Trump is afraid of losing his power in a free and fair election. He's very afraid of being impeached again. He said as much earlier this year, on January 6th, in fact.
You got to win the midterms, because if we don't win the midterms, it's just going to be, I mean, they'll find a reason to impeach me. I'll get impeached.
Find a reason? At this point, it's harder to find reasons not to impeach him. And so Donald Trump came up with a plan to rig the midterms, a combination of gerrymandering Democrats out of their House seats in red states. Again, in the middle of the decade, when this is just never done. It's done every 10 years of the census, but screw that, right? So they're going to do that and then pass this national bill that would be the most onerous voter suppression law in American history. And he was very clear about this, right? The point wasn't to persuade the median voter, the cross-pressured voter, that they had the best agenda. No, it was these two means to barricade themselves into power. He explicitly said that the point was to engineer races where people can't vote Republicans out of office.
I'll tell you what, Republicans have to win this one. We'll never lose a race. For 50 years, we won't lose a race. We want voter ID. We want proof of citizenship. And we don't want mail-in ballots.
Right? So that's the plan, to change the way voting happens, to change the districts, to basically change the rules of the game rather than actually compete in the game. And while Republicans have yet to pass those voting restrictions into law, though they've tried, they have all across the country, with some notable exceptions like India and other places, gone all in on Trump's gerrymandering plan. This, I can't stress this enough, this has never happened before, what we're seeing. Never. There was one mid-decade redistricting in Texas under George W. Bush. That was a huge deal. But what we've seen at Trump's direction is that in red state after red state, they have been squeezing out blue districts. And in response to that, Democrats have countered to try to level the playing field, to get things back to par, to get things back to even so that voters can actually decide who should be in Congress. In California and Virginia, Democrats in those states submitted plans for the new maps to the voters. They didn't just ram them through. They said, look, this is our proposal. They went to the voters, and in both states, the voters said, yes. What a novel idea. What a novel idea. Giving the voters a say in all this, in how districts are drawn, how maps are drawn, in who represents them. The voters saying, the voters. Have you heard of them? That's the thing Republicans are trying to destroy. Keep in mind, we already have evolved into a constitutional system that right now, as I speak to you, is deeply structurally biased against one party, the Democrats. It's biased against them in the Senate, where 39 million Californians get the same number of senators as 600,000 people in Wyoming. You ever stop and think, like, why is there a North and a South Dakota? It's biased against them in the Electoral College, where smaller, more rural states with winner-take-all rules favor Republicans. It is why, if you've been paying attention over the last several decades of American politics, we have had not one, but 2 elections in the past 7 where the Republican candidate won despite getting fewer votes than their opponent. In every other race in the entire country, the person with more votes wins. In every single one except one. Now, in this system that has evolved to be structurally biased towards Republicans, the one place where popular sentiment generally gets transferred most directly is, you guessed it, the House of Representatives. And so now Republicans are trying to electoral collegeify and Jim Crowify the House, so that Democrats need to win by 2 or 4 or 6 points nationally just to get the same number of seats as Republicans, to open up the possibility of an election like 2000 or 2016 in which more people vote for Democrats, but Republicans still maintain the majority. That is an unbelievably dangerous situation, right? It's the potential difference between a do-nothing Congress that continues to bow to an aspiring king and a truly representative body that restores some semblance of sanity and accountability. But deeper than that, it's the difference between us having a democracy or not. And yet, despite all this, Virginia's Supreme Court reinforced that Republican advantage today. Again, they vetoed the voters. You don't see it that much. You don't see courts just go like that to an election that much. No to 1.6 million voters in their state. No to a last-ditch attempt at parity, fairness, and justice. Now, the court's majority was wrong. I think they were actually wrong on the technical meaning of the law. If you read their opinion in the dissent has a better part of it. But this is part of an insane asymmetry between how democratically controlled states and Republican-controlled states have been treating this redistricting arms race that Donald Trump started, right? On one side, Democrats are going through procedure after procedure, right? They got initiatives, they changed the maps, then they got initiatives on the ballots, then they had to run a campaign, then they had to go to the voters, and they had to pass the new maps. On the other side, as Semaphore puts it, Republicans are simply not limited by so many small d democratic restrictions. They just convene their legislatures, which themselves, by the way, are highly gerrymandered to begin with, that have these like insane 80-20 majorities. And then that gerrymandered state legislature rams through a new gerrymandered congressional map. Like in Tennessee, where Republicans yesterday took the state's last majority-minority district in Memphis, a congressional district that has existed since 1923, because obviously there's a district that represents one of the largest cities in the state, and cracked it into pieces in order to give Republicans every House seat in the state. They did this while hundreds of people protested outside.
People have died to be able to have representation, and they are stealing it. They are changing the laws mid-game and trying to take away the voice of people, and these voices matter.
It's illegal, and it just shows you how hell-bent they are on taking away the black voice in Memphis.
Oh, they're not done. No, they're not done. They did it in Alabama today, too. They kept get this, they kept the State House open through a tornado evacuation, okay? The state was being evacuated because there was a tornado. There were leaks happening in the building. This is a state that's got its fair share of problems. It ranks near the bottom in a whole host of things. But no, they stuck to their guns. You hear that siren in the background. And in a building being evacuated, they got together to approve a map that eliminates one of the 2 majority black districts.
It really just hurts me and it just disturbs me that we're at this point in 2026, an entirely new century, and then we're still arguing over who has the right to have rights.
Then, of course, there's Louisiana. Last week, the Supreme Court basically killed off what was left of the Voting Rights Act. It gave that state's Republicans carte blanche to draw a new map. Now, that election, the primary election, had already started. 40,000 people had already voted. The governor declared a state of emergency. He declared a state of emergency because he didn't like what was happening in the vote. Today, The state legislature opened public hearings to consider maps that would just happen to eliminate one or both of Louisiana's majority black districts. You get the pattern here, right? One after another, so that there's no black members of Congress left in the states of the old Confederacy. One state senator called them out on it while hearing testimony from the only 4 black people to represent the state in the House since Reconstruction.
We have over 4.4 million people in the state. A third are African American. This is a former slave state. Since the end of slavery, these 4 gentlemen have represented us in Congress. That's it. And now we want to reduce that. My public comment is anger. This upsets me. How do we not focus on race?
Think about that, right? It's the blackest part of the whole country, states of the Old South, Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, South Carolina. You see the trend. Donald Trump's plan isn't to win over voters. It's to win elections in perpetuity by blocking voters' ability to have a say. Choosing your voters, moving them around like pieces on a board instead of letting them choose you. And it only works if Republicans can systematically disenfranchise black voters in the American South. They want a new Jim Crow. They're very explicit about it. They're hard at work trying to make it happen, and now they have a blessing from the Supreme Court.
Stacey Abrams, voting rights activist and host of the Assembly Required podcast.
So good to have you on the show. The NAACP almost immediately sued to block this effort from Tennessee. Can you give us a sense of what fighting back in this moment is going to look like?
It's going to require that we remember we are the United States of America. And so we have to sit what Tennessee is doing next to the fight that's coming out of Louisiana, next to the fight that will follow in Mississippi and likely in South Carolina. We are watching in real time the restoration of the very laws that pretended racial neutrality, but were intended to deny black and brown voters the right to participate in democracy, which is one of the principal goals of authoritarianism. They do not want the people who may disagree with them to be heard. And right now in the United States, race is the strongest predictor of political leanings. And so it's a lucky twofer. They get the partisanship, but they also get the white supremacy that they seek. And I sat in a hearing yesterday in Nashville, Tennessee, when the author of the legislation said, well, this is a conservative state. We should only have conservatives. And they intentionally erased the only black district, one of 9 districts, the only one that allowed black Tennesseans to have some voice because they've already cracked Nashville. But we have to remember this is happening around the country, and it is part of an intentional nationwide pattern of behavior. We can be angry about Tennessee, and we can laud the Tennesseans who have fought back so ably, but we've got to remember they started in the South, but they're coming for everyone.
Part of that nationwide pattern of behavior. Also in Mississippi, the governor there, Tate Reeves, told the Daily Caller in an exclusive interview on Wednesday, they say that Mississippi lawmakers are already preparing for a special session focused on the state Supreme Court districts, but said he has the authority to expand that call to include other redistricting matters, potentially including its congressional and state legislative maps. Reeves also notes that Benny Thompson's majority minority district was drawn race consciously, basically hinting that it could be targeted for redistricting. I think the thing that is, when people hear this, immediately they start thinking, this is just black, this is a black and brown people problem, right? They're trying to keep them from voting, right? But talk a little bit about how this is something everyone should care about. And there's a reason why, because when black people might get the flu when everybody getting a cold, but you're still getting sick. And so someone has to make sure that at the end of the day, this is not able to spread.
Exactly, Eugene. Part of the challenge is that because of the centuries of racism that attend the United States, we have pretended this notion of race neutrality, ignoring that the systems that created what we have affected everyone. I have white neighbors. And so what it means is that when my ability to participate in elections is thwarted and undermined, anyone next to me might be harmed as well. Memphis is 64% black, but that means the rest of the folks there are affected too. And now they have to hope that their needs are being met by people who do not share their issues. And you played it, part of the clip. Imagine if you lived in a community of cattle ranchers, but you were only ever able to elect vegans. They would say that it is dietary, neutral. It just so happens that the majority are vegans. But if you're a cattle rancher, this is going to affect your ability to make a living. It's going to affect your ability to take care of your family. We have to recognize that in the United States, we may be 50 different states, but we are one people. And when any of our people are denied access to democracy, when we are denied participation, this becomes a pretext for denying it for the next group that they decide they don't like. They may start with black and brown voters, but they're coming for everyone.
They are, Stacey. It's a real pleasure to see you again. You and I have been on the opposite side of politics. We've worked together at Howard University, and I stand with you on this issue. I don't know what the hell's wrong with my party. I don't know what the hell their problem is, because they are just drunk stupid right now. Now, when you sit up there, race is a leading predictor. Y'all don't want to talk about DEI out there. Y'all don't want to talk about race, but everything you do touches on all of that. Everything you're doing touches on all of that. It's hitting black people upside the head. It's hitting brown people upside the head in their communities. So what are we talking about here? And I love what you just said. I mean, you have this legislator saying, well, this is a conservative state, right? We should only have conservatives. Then why the hell y'all out here, B word inserted, about California and New York and other liberal states, other blue states? So why are you so concerned about what they're doing? If, Tennessee, Mississippi, Alabama, we conservative, so we want all conservative. It doesn't matter that we got black and brown, liberals, Democrat, Republican in our state. As long as they're not conservative, they don't get to vote. They don't get the right to have a voice. What the hell are you talking about? Stacey, this breaks down to a very simple thing, and you know it, I know it. Everybody now got to get off their ass, I'm sorry, and get busy about the vote. This November, you got to overwhelm the ballot with your vote. If you want to stop this mess, you need to start unelecting these state legislators. And I know I had a hand in putting some of them there. I'll be honest about it, they turned out to be tickleheads. All right? The reality of it is, this is the opportunity now where you begin to take your government back, people. Stacey, talk about that piece of it, because I don't think people really appreciate how valuable the vote has become. If you never thought it was important before, damn it, it is the most important thing in front of you right now.
My parents grew up without the Voting Rights Act. My parents were born in 1949.
Yep.
They were born in 1949. They were in college before the Voting Rights Act passed. And what we have to understand is that there are no longer blue states and red states. There are authoritarian states and democracy states. There are states that do not believe in the right of the people to have a say, who want to aggregate power and foment corruption. And there are states that want to guarantee that in this country, we have free and fair elections. We have access to the remedies that democracy is supposed to deliver, and that no matter what goes wrong in one part of the country, that the quality of your citizenship does not depend on your zip code and your geography. I started the 10 Steps campaign because we've got to understand that authoritarianism is a political system designed to achieve ideological ends. And the ideological ends intended by this regime do not include most of us. If you believe that Christian nationalism should be the law of the land, if you want proto-natalism where women are relegated to simply serving as vessels for a man's intention, if you believe that white supremacy should be allowed to diminish the value of everyone else, then you want authoritarian states to win. But if you believe in democracy as the currency of America, then you want California and New York. You want every state that's willing to fight back to do so. But to your point, Michael, it can work. I'm from Georgia. I grew up in Mississippi. I came of age in Georgia. It took us a while. But what we did in Georgia was not about bringing in new people. It was about reminding the people here that democracy could deliver. We didn't get all the way there with my races, but my races weren't the point. The point were the people. And I want us to remember that between 2014 and 2018, when we got to work, not just registering voters, but talking to voters, connecting the dots between their needs and an election, we were able to generate 800,000 new voters in a single election cycle. They may not have gotten me over the finish line, but we got 16 electoral college votes for Joe Biden, and we got 2 U.S. senators. Everywhere across this country, when we show up and when we vote all the way down the ballot, especially to the fine print, that's how we not only serve the purpose of winning these elections, it's how we reassert the fact that this is a nation of elections and of leadership. But then we've got to do the work in between. If you already live in a blue state, you need to be talking to your legislators about passing their own statewide Voting Rights Act. You need to be talking about making sure that the democracy in your state is as visible and as loud as possible. But overall, what we've got to remember is that if you are in a safe place, you got to start sending your resources, your support, and your intentions to the states that need your help. Do not abandon the South. They incubate evil here, but they farm it out everywhere. But we also incubate the solutions here. And we know we can win this fight. But yes, we've got to win in November. But that means showing up for primaries. That means showing up for the general. And then it means making sure we're paying attention in 27, in 28, and in 2030 when the census happens, because that's when they start this all over again. We can pull this off, but we've got to start fighting now because we're already behind, but we can catch up.
Steve Cohen, the state's lone Democratic member of Congress, whose Memphis seat is on the line in this Republican redistricting push. Congressman, thank you for being with us. As your state lawmakers plow forward on redrawing Tennessee's congressional map, what's at stake if this black majority district is broken up?
Well, it destroys what was some of the highlights of the 60s, one of the greatest legislative accomplishments of Lyndon Johnson and the Congress in the 20th century, of passing the Voting Rights Act with Martin Luther King and John Lewis there to fight for it, among others. The people who died for that right to vote, John Lewis's march across the Edmund Pettus Bridge and the march to Montgomery, and it's all wiped out. This was to make up for years of slavery and Jim Crow and give African Americans voting districts where they had the opportunity to elect the candidate of their choice. And they've done that in a wonderful way. Black people are very engaged in politics. It's an important part of their livelihoods and their success and their advancements in America. This is a great turnaround and a turn back to Jim Crow era politics in the 50s. And the Southern legislatures, like the one in Tennessee, that were off at the lines in the South and all over the country, won't be able to raise racial arguments even when they are obvious. It is obvious as the shoe on your foot that this is a racially based gerrymandering to eliminate the black vote, which is a core Democratic vote. But that's why they're being eliminated. This district was not a voting rights district. It was a district of compactness, of community of interest, of Memphians who live together. It's a large black population, and they've had that district. I've represented it 20 years, and I feel like I'm going to my own funeral.
I hear what you're saying. Can you explain why you feel that black voices and black votes won't be heard or won't be counted in the same way? And what options, if any, do you and your Democratic colleagues have to fight back?
African Americans have been a majority in this district, 61% in the general District 9, and in a primary, 80%. 80% in a Democratic primary where the candidate's basically chosen. And I've won that district 9 times in re-election with 80% black vote and never lost a precinct. African-American voters don't vote on race. They vote on the candidate who they want to deliver services, to deliver to Memphis, and to deliver constituent services. They've done it. With this district, the way it is divided, Memphis in 3 different maps that stretch out up close to the Kentucky line and over towards Nashville, on the Mississippi line and towards Chattanooga, and then in the center going out, drawn from one particular man, a man named Brent Taylor, who's a House member, and he drew that map for himself. Those districts will make the black voting population of Memphis a tail of a comet. They will not get any regards from the people who are running in the Republican primaries, who will be the winner, because these are big-time majority Republican districts, and the black vote will not be sought, and it will not be listened to. And there will not be offices in Memphis to deal with constituent services, Social Security, Medicaid, VA issues, whatever. And there won't be community projects that Memphis needs. Memphis is a big city, the second biggest city in Tennessee, an iconic city in America. I have delivered, my predecessor, Cheryl Ford Jr. and Sr. delivered. Nobody will deliver because it's not going to be an important part of that voting block. They will not get community projects. They will not get the needs they want. And one thing that shows how foolish this is, you have a baseball team, 9 players. We have 9 congressmen. You have 9 players who play 9 different positions and can help you different ways. When we needed a bridge built across the Mississippi River, one of the biggest projects this state's ever saw, they came to me, the lone Democrat, to lobby Pete Buttigieg under Biden. I was able to get Buttigieg in the Biden administration to give $450 million to this project. There will be a new bridge built over the Mississippi River because the Republican governor and the Republican team came to the Democrat, the only Democrat they had who could deliver. They asked me to deliver, and I delivered. There's going to be a Democratic president in 2028. There will be nobody to deliver. They're doing all this for Donald Trump for one reason, to stop oversight of him in the Congress next term. We can oversee his kleptomania, his cryptocracy and the money he's made, his emoluments violations, his pardon violations. They don't want that. For one man, the most heinous criminal man ever to hold the White House, ever, they're turning Tennessee around, they're turning black votes around, they're turning Memphis around. Filling a city, a great American city.
Congressman Steve Cohen, I appreciate your passion. Thank you so much